Hello, I'm going to showcase the workshop from the Guru hack of the DOMLogger++ extension. So as you have seen here, this extension has been created by Kevin Mizu, who's a French security researcher, and there is a version for Firefox and Chromium. I will be using the Chromium one because it has more extensibility. And once I install it, I will have the icon for DOMLogger here, and I'd be then able to start the process. Kevin has created that workshop, which allows to present slowly, piece by piece, the different parts of the DOMLogger extension and how it can help in the day-to-day bug bounty or even security research journey. The hello world is basically the starting point where it presents the download links for Chromium and Firefox, and Safari doesn't have one. Like I showed you, it's basically directly in the stores, but you could also install it directly from the folder since both Chromium and Firefox have side loading available for the developer mode. Once you install it, the first thing to do is to set up the target logging domain, which is basically asking DOMLogger to listen to specific things. Here we can ask to a current domain, which will use the subdomain too, and its exact origin for that one. Or we can just like say, hey, I want whatever is Missouri coming from. So any subdomain from that domain will also be listened and triggering our logging. Note that we could also do some regular expression here in order to get the same result here. Or if we have Mizu or Mizuzi, whatever, you'd be able to enter it and then add it there. So we added the current domain, and we will then select the default version of hooking, which can be seen here. And it's like having a specific hook for XSS in HTML and having a remove header section, which we'll learn about it in a few. So here, if we have that already set up, we just have to simply refresh the page and that will complete the exercise. And voila, we have cleared the first one. So what happens exactly? And that's what we discover here. The next step will be to check the DevTools. If you go F12, you have a new DOMLogger++ appearing. And you have the filter sinks here. You have capability of searching specific data or even having like some kind of advanced search query. You can manage the table the way you want it, like filtering, sorting, moving. It's a basic data table. You can search for the data on the entire table, not just like what you're seeing. You can print the stack trace of the sink by using the 6, which is here. You have the trace and anything else, and then on reload the page where the sink was found, set a debugger breakpoint, which is basically go to under the debug and go to GitHub, import logs, remove logs, export logs, and access settings, which will be those 5 items. This one doesn't have much, so it's solved by just reading it. And now we're starting to create our custom configuration. And we will focus on configuring which sinks DOMLogger will retrieve information from. And for that, we will actually open the settings. And by doing that, we just open this one, which is going to open a tab with the different settings page. The hooking settings is actually the one where you can create profiles or different settings that you can then enable on the fly directly from the extension panel. The settings page allows you also to create a new one, rename, save it, trash it, or export it to be able to re-import it elsewhere. So the exercise itself is gonna be about checking or creating our first JSON configuration, and it's start by creating one, and we are going to name it. The the goal itself is to create a hook that will allow us to solve the exercises to the first one, this one, but also the next ones. The configuration itself is using sections. The one that we're going to be interested in is the hooks ones, which has the category, and this is what basically categorizes the sync. Kind of arbitrary, but it's like naming them so that we can refer to them later on in the configuration, for example. And the second one is about the type. The types are class, function, event, attribute, or custom. And this will actually be usable in different places where you want to check or get specific things depending on their type itself, or the JavaScript types to be more precise. And the target is basically what is going to be the name or the function name or the attribute name that you want to set up. So the GitHub repository README has like a more detailed version of what can be accepted there. You can go look into it. You have videos and all, but you mostly have description about the hooks, the things, and what can be done with each of them. Multiple hooks can be defined in one configuration, and several examples are created in the config folder for the GitHub repository. There is one specific that is called custom and designed to hook things that aren't really exposed by the browser or JavaScript, and that's when those types are custom variables or function, and you usually use type colon and the target name for it. So we have apparently enough information to log a first sync, and we need to solve it. So we need to fulfill all the conditions listed below. And don't forget to update. Okay, so hook the setter of the inner HTML attribute, hook the get function of the URL search param class, hook the onError event, hook the function class, and hook the custom class global variable music. The code that we kind of need to watch are the following. And we can see that there is an inner HTML that is interesting. We need to be notified or log any use of the get from the URL search param. We want to be logging the on errors for events. We want to identify when the Mizu variable is set or get the function class, and I think we did all. So let's dig into a configuration file that will allow us to do that. So we want to create a new one, which will be workshop create, and as a hook for now. We don't care about this one, so I don't actually, I will keep it there, but I will not set anything in it. If I do Control S, I can see that my config is updated. And note that if I'm doing a wrong JAS or invalid JSON, it will actually tell me that I did something wrong. For example, if I misname this one, it's going to tell me, hey, remove header is an invalid root key, and only description hooks config remove headers with S globals and all load can be used. So pretty neat in order to not mess up the configuration file. So taking the default one as an example, I can see that we had the XSS category that was listening into the inner HTML. And I will shamelessly steal this one. And I will call it car1. So switching to workshop, refreshing the page, I have the first one. Okay. And just for the sake of verifying that I have actually done something, I will just do the get instead of the set, and you can see that the checkbox is not checked anymore. So it's really about the setting here. So I have the inner HTML. Let's focus on the event on error. The event on error is literally going to be using the type event, and it's gonna be the error type. So if I do Control S, I have missed something. So what's the issue here? Oh yeah, okay. I have there. So on my car1 category, I want to check attribute and the on error event. So if I refresh that one, got the end, I have the on error event. Now, what about the class for function? And that's pretty much the same type. So I will just, not the same type, sorry, the same pattern. It's a function, and the function is, sorry, it's the other way around. It's the class, and the function is called function with a capital F. Saved, config updated, refresh, go to the end. I am hooking the function class. Cool. And so now let's talk about this get method from the URL search params. So it seems to be more function this time, because it's the function that is going to be URL with a capital LRL search params dot get, but that's not going to work, because if I do this and go here, it will still tell me that I didn't pick that up. And that's because of how JavaScript is actually creating that function. So if I look up that function, basically in the console, and doing like URL search param, I can see that there is no get direct, but there is one in the prototype property. So what I could do is then basically hook not this one, but the prototype version of it. So if I do this now, save and refresh the page, I have now hooked the get method for it, which is cool. Now I have a function that is logged, which is cool. And the only thing that is remaining is the global parameter variable Mizu, which needs to be logged to. So since it's window.mizu, it's not JavaScript automatically, and so we're going to leverage the custom one. And because we are doing it this way, custom, it's the dot Mizu of Windows, so it's the attribute colon Mizu. Control S to save, refresh, and I have been successful. All things are cleared. Yay. we have the second one done. So configuration 101. So we have been dealing with the hooks. Now let's see how we can configure the hooks to know exactly what should be logged and making sure that we are able to cover all the different trickiness of that functionality. Kind of the same way it works with like whatever the target was, the configuration option, and then its value. The target is basically the category, the type, or the target that you want to get from the hooks. Config option would be match, not match, match trace, not match trace, hook the function, require hook, alert, and hide this. The config value will be depending on whatever you have put there as like a configuration option. So we are going to focus for this exercise onto the match and not match, but also on the alert. Those are requesting regex pattern, so you can set up and filter syncs based on what the data has been passed to them. And the alert is actually basically checking if there is a notification that is needed and when it's needed. There is the alert, which will then provide with like a small badge counter here, and notification will also trigger a notification on top of the alert. So what happens if you are configuring both the category and the target at the same time? In such cases, the directive closest to the target will have the highest priority. And so that means that basically if you have function, in this example, the eval function is going to match something, and this match will be taken, but the function itself type will not be matched because that's basically this match is closest to eval. However, the not match from the function in general will actually be useful also for the eval logging. So if there is a function eval, the non-match from the function and the match from the eval will be actually taken. And for optimizing the configuration, you also have different tips like using star in order to do all syncs or any syncs, and the pipe that could be used to have multiple configuration at the same time. So our challenge this time is going to be logging the different things with those conditions. We need to hook the inner HTML. If it matches the logger, we need to match anything. If DOMLogger pp is there, we do not log it. If the attribute outer HTML needs to be hooked, if it does not match logger, we need to trigger an alert without notification if that sync is found, and we need to trigger an alert with a notification if DOMLogger++ matches any sync to basically this one. So from the look of it, we need inner HTML and outer HTML syncs. Luckily, we have the inner HTML already, and we just need to have the outer HTML one. Control S, and I'm missing the comma. Yes. So going back to this one, we do log it inner HTML only if it matches logger. So let's do configuration for it. We'll remove all that, verify that everything's still working, and then here for, oops, we already had it. So if this one is there, I want it this way, and if it match, we said if it matches logger, if it Matches loggers match as an invalid. Content must be an array. Okay, so be it. And poof. Perfect, looks like it's working. We have it. And hook the outer HTML attribute if not match logger. So poof. Okay. We have logger in that, so that's the potential reason why it's not working. Trigger an alert. So if DOMLogger pp match anything, do not log it. So the anything is related to the star, and we have another anything here, so we do have two options for a star. Let me copy this one and put the star here. So if DOMLogger pp match anything, and we don't want to log it, so it's going to be not match DOMLogger pp. And trigger an alert with a notification when DOMLogger ++ match anything. So for anything, we want to alert, and this alert needs to match DOMLogger ++. Oh, probably going to be JSON plus regex, so double. We want it with a notification, so it needs to do notification true. Okay, we have it. Trigger an alert without notification on the outer HTML sync when it fails. So it's basically when the outer is matched. So we need a match here. Actually, no. We just need an alert without notification. So empty object. And we have the notification. Okay, config 101 is solved, so let's go for on message now. On message is going to be a showcase. The goal is to provide an example of basic hook match and alert usage, which allows us to detect the on message event listener and receive a notification for important ones. The idea here is going to be If we end up like on a page where we have a lot of messages, being able to detect things where we would be able to spoof the origin, or having some kind of like interesting sync, but being able to have origin check bypassed, or even like direct usage of the data itself. So here we're going to use the post message version, which is going to be post message beam 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 save. Going here, switching to post messages and refresh. I have post messages sync on message, post message reached on the second one, and we had 3 alerts. So if I go to my DOMLogger, I see my 3 alerts here, and the 3 alerts are showing if data HTML. We have also seeing an invalid origin check, and we are also seeing the post message proxy. So if I look at that, to solve this exercise, you need to pop an alert out of them. Don't waste your time using another website. Use post message from the console is enough. Okay, so here it seems that we have one that requires an opener, one that is checking the index of the origin, and one that does nothing and just use the data HTML. So let's use this one instead. So to solve that one, we just need to alert, and the most interesting one would just be the HTML one. So we just need to post message the object. That's the one I typed earlier. So I'm using HTML, and it will add that one, and the origin is star. So if I do this, I have my alert that is popping because it's going through the different post message, and it's actually solving this one. Kudos. Okay, we can see how DOMLogger can be super helpful. However, there are cases where it doesn't actually work. One of the most commonly reported bugs is that the syncs cannot be found. And the issue is actually stemming from how browser extensions are working. Essentially, what it means is that the extension itself in DOMLogger is injecting a script at the beginning of the DOM loading process. However, there is no way to instruct a browser to wait for DOMLogger to be executed and loaded. So the page will actually continue while the hooking is starting to be initialized. And there is then a delay, which is about 20 milliseconds, where DOMLogger is actually blind. And sometimes it doesn't really matter, but some other times it's actually making it super complicated to get things on the header or the head, for example. In the example here, we have a script that is warning DOMLogger cannot hook natively, and the idea would be to get a match and replace here so that the script is injected before or just after the head, and that is actually going to be delaying a bit more and letting DOMLogger the time to be initialized and loading. Let's give an example of that. In this, we need to hook console warn at the top of the document. If we just run the switch to workshop, and we are going to hook the function console.warn, and we're going to remove all the config for now. Control S. So now if I refresh that thing, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because we are here just after the head, and that hasn't been yet loaded. The hook hasn't been loaded, so we have not detected that call. Here I am now setting the response body to inject the Mizu no cache PHP, and as you can see, it's actually inserting it accordingly. I'm going to enable burp and refresh. And that hasn't been done. So now that I am enabling that one, I will control F5 it and get this one there. And I can see oh, I didn't select the workshop. Refresh. Control F5. So we have the no cache, but we get a violation of the CSP. So to solve that, I will remove the headers and would just add the so it's still refusing because I didn't remove the headers here. So if I go selecting this one, setting save, refresh, I didn't do the error, and if I control F5 this time, so now if I F5, F12, DOMLogger++, I can see that I have a console warn, which means I have been correctly getting this one in. So now fixed. Config 102. So config 102 is about more advanced topics like the match trace and the non-match trace, but also the hide this, which will hide this argument or not. So we were covering those new keys, which are part of the configuration, and we will be focusing on fixing this challenge. So the idea here is to hook the console log. So we already did that previously. And so console log, save. So if I refresh that page now, I'm getting its checkbox here. However, we want to, oops, let's go see what's happening in our DOMLogger. We have this equal debug blah 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 blah, and this equal blah 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 blah, and we want to have use this to true to remove this equal in the logging function. And so we want to use it in the config, and for that we want to have console log. Oops, I had already the quotes. So console log will have its own section, and this section will include hide this to true. So if I save now and refresh, I should see the second one. So now let's look into this one, the trace, the stack trace to be precise. It's going to tell us what is the stack trace and basically what are different instructions that led to this call itself. And we can see that it has been stemming from the 7.configs102.js line 1 column 9, and the DOMLogger++ allows us to check also if something is coming from a specific stack trace, which allows us to filter out different things coming from Google Analytics, for example, things like that, where we're not interested, or on the contrary, where if we are interested into a specific file or origin of the instruction. So here, we don't want to log, sorry, we want to have everything logged if 7.config102.js is in stack trace. So here we're just going to be doing a match trace of this. If I do Control S to save, the config has been updated, and if I refresh the page, I have the configs, which means I have correctly set everything here. Next part would be about start logging when. The required hooks configuration is designed to start logging specific things only if another one has been found before. It might not seem clear for now, but imagine when you have an HTML injection on the page and it's limited by a sanitizer. Something you might want to do in such situation is to log all the DOM manipulation and HTML events and document access, so the DOM clobbering, that occur after the HTML injection. Note that Kevin Mizu is also agreeing on the fact that you could just clear the logs and start reading them from the HTML injection, but its way doesn't provide any false positives. So here's an example of how to use these kind of things. You usually have two things, the one that is making the first injection start, and then whatever is using this injection. So here we have the required, and then we have the target. And we have configuration for match and configuration for required hook. Required hooks allows only the category and not the sync name itself. So the first exercise aims to familiarize us with the configuration key, and in the next one we are going to actually leverage that with the sanitizer. So apparently we have pretty much everything covered. the document get element by class name, start hooking the document selector link only after the canary value reaches an inner HTML, and start hooking only when. So let's do, first we have leverage inner HTML as an example. We're going to use that one. So required here, selectors here, and the config is going to use the required match the canary, and selectors required, hooks required. Okay, so let's use that one specifically for now, but we're going to change it. So we only have we are going to get document get element by class name. So we are going to simplify it with require and target, and remove all the fuss here. Okay, and then we are going to don't need that, and we'll remove all of that. Okay, and now we want target here. So it's not target though, it's the category. So we want function required hooks required. Okay, and the canary is 1 2 3 4 5. Yep, and we only need the selector and class name. Okay, technically I could be doing that. Control S should be working. And so if I do this, yes, it's working. So what I did is basically setting up the required to be creating the inner HTML sync. And this one needs to be matching the canary 1 2 3 4 5. And once that is matched, the required hooks needs to be matching, and then target is actually enabled, and having query selector get element by ID working, which means that if I do F12 DOMLogger++ and refresh that one, I should be able to see my stuff. Yay! Cool. Let's go doing some fancy stuff. Start logging when. It's going to be a showcase now. Because we are going to have a configuration for inner HTML and being able to check that portion of the code. So to solve the challenge here, we need to find a way to trigger an alert. We're going to leverage the inner HTML configuration, which is basically going to log anything that begins with an inner HTML sync that can be abused to bypass the HTML sanitizer. And so we are going to check this. So leverage inner HTML. This one is going to be saved directly as a new one. Leverage inner HTML. Save, Control S. Switching here. Leverage inner HTML and refresh. Now going to F12, DOMLogger. I do see a few things. We see required. So now if I look at this challenge, there is an HTML required match. So let's just have it there and do test 1 2 3 4 5 6. If I load that, go to F12, DOMLogger++ and look at my entries. I do have nothing of interest. Why is that? Okay, cannot read property null, reading dataset, which means technically that something went wrong here. And here it's basically saying that query selector of debug is null and therefore it crashes the JS. So we need something with a class being debug. So let's go back here and we create a div with a class debug. lol/div. I have no more console error, and if I go to DOMLogger, I should see interesting things. Or not. So now that we have the inner HTML, we can see that it's actually matching and requiring canary. So in our first thing, we're going to use canary and go F12 for DOMLogger, and we can see that it's actually up. On click inner HTML, get by ID for challenge HTML, get by ID challenge HTML, get selector of debug, and then on focus query selector all. Anything that is the text which is provided by materialize, so that's the noise. And so we can see that we have this debug here, which is basically the one we intended. So if we go for div class debug, with the canary to enable everything, I'm going to refresh the page and 12. So now we are going for everything, but where is it? I want debug. Where are you, debug? So this time I have the debug one and I'm getting this one. So how many I have? I'm having it coming from here. So dataset. Where is my debug? It's here. And then it's asking for the dataset. Okay. So here that means that the dataset help is expecting a data dash help, and if I do a lol here, I would be able to see my setup, which would then be adding a lol somewhere. Here it's getting lol from the dataset, and because I am showing only those, this dataset debug challenge blah 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 lol. So here I can see my inner HTML that is adding the whole thing, but if I add my canary as part of the help, I should be able to see my second addition of inner HTML. So if I switch back to my, I have 16 entries now. Canary, where are you, my canary? Canary. here we go. Here we have our last one, which is basically the 1753 on that one. And that means if I go to debug and switch to the call stack, second part anonymous, I can see that it's there. So I have canary here, which means that I can technically add my payload then instead of canary here and do img src on error equal alert1 and save it. I have my alert, and that means it's resolved. Yay! Okay, let's see about bypassing HTML Sanitizer version 1. So now that we have inner HTML configuration, it's going to use a specific gadget for materialize.js. To solve this challenge, we need to find a way to trigger the alert. The challenge is basically relying pretty much on the same thing as before. However, where the previous one had the inner HTML here, we don't have it anymore, which means that we have to work with the version sanitized after the DOMLogger sanitize. And since it's using materialize, there is a gadget that is probably going to be involving the initialization here. So by looking at the code, we can see that the initialization is working against some kind of materialize select tag that has the class materialize select. So I assume that there is something to go on with select tags. So what happens if we do select here and select here? And for now, I would just use canary, and the class would be materialize select, just to see what we have. I don't need the rest for now. F12, DOMLogger. So what do we have? We have, okay. First F5, F12, DOMLogger. And we have 17 entries, and the one oldest is there. We have the inner HTML of our canary, which is there, and then on focus on click datasets of anything which is going to get the get attribute data target. Okay, determined by ID. Options. Okay. Okay. So it's using a data target. Where is it exactly? We'll see that right now. Beam. Okay. Okay, sounds good. But can we do something out of that? Not necessarily. However, when I look at the select of the materialize, I can see that there are usually options. So I think I will add one. Yeah, let's add one. So option value 1, so on and so on. What's happening under the hood? We do have the tab index now. So we have the inner HTML of the initial thing, and then we have body datasets of a getter. Query. Okay, this one is interesting. It's getting the data icon, which is interesting, and this one is the other one. Okay, I'm interested in the data icon. If I switch to this one and debug, going to back. Okay, so it's getting the content of the data icon, and if there is one, it's basically creating with the concatenation an image tag with the source being whatever is coming from the icon, and then prepending it to the span or the appended option text area or area. So okay, so here we're going to go for data dash icon xxxx and this. So what happens now? Do I have console issue? No. Okay, so getting back to my stuff, get attribute of the data icon. What happens on, call it canary. Canary is here. Okay, we have the xxxx backslash option 1. Okay, so what happens if I do this? Okay, so if I do one here, should be good. Okay. And so apparently it's the quote that is missing. So if I do semicolon slash slash, I got my one. Yay! So next part is about tracking execution flow, and it's using hook functions, which is designed to infer the arguments of the sink and before they are consumed, so we can use it to basically just provide and do stuff with the arguments that are provided and received, the target that is used, and basically the object method that it affects. So if we do hook function args plus equal a return args, it will make sure that it will basically add or concatenate a to the argument and provide a new argument. One of the most powerful ways to use it is to detect patterns that require multiple syncs to occur in sequence. A good example is inner text, which decodes HTML entities and can lead to XSS if its value is later assigned to an inner HTML. To hook into these patterns, we need to use basically a canary value, which will be passed to the first sync. Update the canary value with a new one using the hook function. So basically replacing a specific amount to another one. And then trigger an alert if the second sync matches the new canary value, indicating that it also originated from the inner text access. One caveat or a few caveats to look for performance-wise. Hooking is basically super heavy and performance consuming, so it might slow down the computer. However, with inner text and inner HTML, it should be fine, but if we hook on more generic or more used function, it might become an issue. And obviously, the dose factor on those can be super huge. And so if we need to hook a function that is already hooked, there is an object that is providing it. So you can use DOMLogger.func with the name of the function in order to call it. So this way you don't do a loop, a hook loop on the function engine. So we need to hook the inner text and the inner HTML. And we need to hook the inner text to replace this with this. Okay, so let's go for workshop, and we are going for the hooks, and as we said, the hooks will be inner HTML and inner text. So we have inner HTML, we just need inner text, and that's it. Now, concerning the configuration, we want to have the inner HTML working on only proccing when we have our this one. But for the inner text, we want to replace the thing. So hook function here, and hook function is basically a string of the, so we want to replace something with something, and that something is this by the other one. Okay. And HTML should contain that thing. So if I do it like img src beam on air one. Oh, might be working better if I am on the correct one. And solved. So that means I had correctly set. For this challenge, the goal is to create a DOMLogger configuration that would automatically detect any replace made to the output of DOM Purify. Why is this important to check? The reason lies on how the content of style tags is processed. For example, replacing all instances of with an empty string could break the sanitization process. A good example is the TinyMC bypass that we had here from Kinoga Masato. The only tip you need is, even if DOM Purify is not defined globally, which would normally make it impossible to hook using a custom type, you can still hook into DOM parser prototype parse from string, a method that is used internally to parse the HTML input string. So let's try to create our configuration, which will look for our hook, which will look for the custom. No, it's a function, so that's the function of that thing here. And for now we are doing nothing at all. So just look that. Refresh. F12. DOMLogger. Control F5. I workshop img src blah 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 blah. No entries. Okay, interesting. Is it maybe because it's not a function, but it should be custom type? And it's a function colon that thing. So first let us go attribute. Because we have an HTML jQuery HTML function, I assume that it's going to be Um, it's going to be assigning the inner HTML of it. So here I'm going to have some setter enabled to get called and modify the value. So I would be able to read through the clean value itself. And so now I should probably workshop correct. Going there, DOMLogger, close F5, F12, DOMLogger. Okay. And I have lol1, lol2, and my imgsrc. It seems that it's going to set it to that one. So removing the on error handler. So the mentioning something with the something to go with the style tag. So what if we add styles now to our style here, and we're talking about clothing. So if I do style, replace style, what did I get here? And that is not working because style is taking it as a text. Okay. Okay. So if that's taking what's inside as a text or switching, how did it handle only one style? If I do this, oh, the img is taken in. So what if I do this? Okay, it took everything as a text after the style. So what if I'm doubling that? So now I do have style. Okay. Okay, so I have added now the replace function, so I can actually look into what's happening here. And I can see here that I'm going to replace whatever is there by the first parameter and the second one. So that means, so the first one is this one, so the tag itself, with either so I added the replace one, and this replace one is going to be a lot of work. So target invalid JSON. Yes, probably because that's not what it expected here. In config, I am okay. For now, I'm going to refresh F12 DOMLogger, and I'm getting those again. Cool. So it's going to replace that one, and if I do go to switching back, going there, empty, then append, then manip, and build fragment, HTML pre-filter, replace, area, br, call, embed, img, input, link, meta param. It's replacing it, removing basically all the attributes that are not there. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. I already have. Oh, it's already removed there. So in order to solve that one, I would still need to be able to hook into DOM parser prototype parse from string. However, that one doesn't seem to work. So I need to kind of circumvent that by trying to find a mutation XSS by myself without the help of DOMLogger, which is kind of defeating the purpose of leveraging such tools. From the hint that is provided, I think it's related to the style tag, and the style tags are processed. For example, replacing all instances of something with an empty string will break the sanitization. I tried giving it nothing here, and that didn't go that well because I have style, the first style that is like considered as text, but the second one is not taken into consideration. However, if I do this, what's happening? Okay, that worked, but why? It worked because it recreated the closing tag here. Did we obtain something over here? Okay, this one interesting. I'll do that this way. Control F5, F12. Lol. So they replaced basically value added the style ending tags, which converted that into a text which hasn't been sanitized, and that means it requested to add that one. Okay, lucky. After talking with Kevin, it seems that I had an issue with my extension because DOM parser function is part of the JavaScript API and it's normally hookable. So here you go. This one worked right away because I already have removed response header and it's already removing the content security policy, the XFO header. Okay, detect client-side pollution. Okay, so this one is basically explaining how DOMLogger++ could help us identify client-side prototype pollution. There is a caveat though, because it's using physical iframe in order to identify if it can pollute itself without making changes to the actual page. So here, that's an example how it's actually making, how it's actually work under the hood. It's creating what we call proxies, and those proxies are basically functions that are conveying the same behavior, but with instrumentation on top of them, which could alter not the logic of the inherent function that we want to proxy. So if the function cannot be hooked, then we cannot really modify that thing. Location object is an example of something that cannot be configured and that DOMLogger cannot hook or interact with because of how it's immutable per se. Location is logically the main source of client-side prototype pollution, and so it's not possible to use basic hooking to detect these attacks. And like I said, in order to circumvent that, Kevin Mizu has created unload event that will inject the knife to the current source and append the CSPP payloads to the query string or hash parameter, and then verify if the window.polluted attribute is actually set or not. And if it's set, then it will notify the fact that we managed to pollute the polluted variable attribute, and that means that the page or the source code is actually vulnerable to CSPP. That mostly also put forward the fact that in order to have CSPP detected this way, we need to be able to do iframes, and therefore we need to remove the security responses headers in order to make the iframe work. And so for that, the idea is to create a global variable, and we need CSPP to trigger an alert. And so for this one specifically, we're going to use directly the CSPP.json. And I have it already. Cool. Save. So going here, I will choose CSPP, and there is no HTML, no HTML variable, so I'll remove it and load it. And I have a notification appearing on the right side telling me that CSPP sync has been reached. If I open my DOMLogger, I can see that CS polluted has been reached. If I try to debug it, what happens? Touch it there. Don't really have anything interesting, but the goal of this exercise is basically to create an alert, and that is possible only when is solved is actually true. So what if we are basically going to this one? Okay, that's not the one. So basically is solved one. And that was the one that triggered. Awesome. Dynamic regex generation. The last thing we need to cover about the config root key is related to dynamic regex generation. And that can be done with the exec colon at the very beginning of the match one, because it can generate a regex using JavaScript. And it's important because this way we could actually leverage this arg or the target itself. And it mostly works like the hook function, but we need to return a regex for it to be working. And so on the challenge here, because there is no real way to discover if that works or not, Kevin wants us to hook the console log and verifying that we're executing an alert directly with the exec instead of like returning a regex. So basically, if we go back to workshop and have our target, which would be hooking our function console log, we want the config to be everything should match exec. So anything that worked. That's how. It needs to return something. So you have args. So taking args, returning args, return args. And it works. Yay. Was it working without the return args, by the way? Yes, it was. Perfect. Okay. So now detect client-side path traversal. And I'll remove that one because it's matching everything. Okay, so now that we know how to execute code on specific matches, we are going to try to detect client-side path traversal. And for that, we're going to look into two things. The two gadgets or things or sources for that one would be the location path query or hash, which would be the first thing of the attacks, and the path used while fetching a resource like XHR, fetches, or open location HR or whatever. Because we have access to the execution of the JavaScript code, we have all the information at the time of the sync to be found, and thanks to this, we can pull the fetched paths, generate the list for it, and then check if one of the words is present in that path, and therefore raise the notification. There is one thing that might go wrong is technically the path itself can call itself and therefore it generate false positives. So yeah, you need to build up your own list of things that will be considered as a blacklist. So for this exercise, we're going to set up the cspt.json and we go to random and look at DOMLogger and how it's detecting it. And we need to pop an alert out of it. So checking the CSPT. CSPT, create, paste, save, and CSPT here. Refresh, and we need to go to random. And we have something that triggered. That something has been fetched using /random. And so if I'm using my debug function here and going back to step behind, I see here that I'm able to actually use the path name here to be grabbing the results of that path name and saving it into inner HTML. So I'm creating a webhook, and this webhook is actually going to serve an IMG with on error. Once I have this URL, I'm going to use that URL here, and hopefully it's getting the alert. Yay. Okay, limitation. The limitations are the one that have been mentioned in the it doesn't work. But there are a few others that are tied to how things have been implemented and how quirks in different browser implementation are. If you hook too many things at once, your computer will get slow and might even crash. To reflect apply, node name to lowercase locations, those are cannot be hooked. The go to button doesn't work if the sync has been found within an iframe. You also have Firefox issues. I don't think it would be easy to use DOMLogger++ on a headless browser, but Kevin Mizu never really tried it. WebSockets are also other things with the webhook, and there is no backend server to use them anyway. And everything comes to an end. That's basically the end of the workshop. You have seen all the points that DOMLogger can cover and help with. You have the extension available with different configurations in the configs folder of the DOMLogger repository, and it's giving you CS, prototype pollution, path traversal, copy or clone of DOM invader, things that helps leveraging inner HTML, but also trying to spot XSS more easily, and something to leverage pass messages in a better way. Puntfox is basically interesting to have a good synergy with DOMLogger, because you can have Puntfox container specific to DOMLogger webhooks that are allowing to receive logs externally. DevTools obviously allows you to enable and disable the option in settings, and you have Customize that will help you customize each types, the colors. You can change the colors, and that's pretty much it. Kevin Mizu is also accepting issues and pull requests if you find any bugs or interesting ways to improve the tool. So thanks again for this magnificent tool, and hope that it will help me and a lot of other people find new bugs. Take care. Bye-bye. I also wanted to thank Kevin Mizu for letting me display and show that video on my YouTube channel. Thank you, man.